Welcome, everybody. I'm Corley Pretorius. I'm Deputy Director of the UN Environment Program World Conservation Monitoring Center. Yes, it is a mouthful, UNEP-WCMC. I'm delighted to be here today and welcome you to our webinar, Adopting a Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that Accelerates Action by Business. This webinar is jointly organized by UNEP-WCMC, Business for Nature, Capitals Coalition, and the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. I'm very pleased to co-host this event with my colleague Eva, and we're going to talk about the Global Biodiversity Framework, which provides an opportunity for the private sector to align with global biodiversity policy and demonstrate their ambition towards reversing the loss of biodiversity.
And hi, everyone. I'm Eva Zabe, the Executive Director of Business for Nature. And I'm so pleased to co-host this webinar with Corley today. I'd like to start this session by sincerely congratulating the two co-chairs of the Post-2020 Framework for the hard work leading to the publication of the draft one of the framework. We cannot imagine how much effort has gone into it. And we'll have a chance, in fact, to hear from one of the co-chairs, Basil, in just a few minutes. But I'd also like to really congratulate the CBD Secretariat and, in fact, all the parties for continuing to push this agenda forward and being able to navigate through so much uncertainty. Every day from around the world, we're seeing extreme heat, rainfall, floods, and wildfires. And so our collective work to address the planetary emergency is as urgent and absolutely critical as ever. And so we're pleased today to bring you all together to demonstrate that the business community is also committed to play its part and work collectively to protect, restore, and sustainably use our natural resources. And for companies, leading companies that understand this, it's simply because the economy cannot exist on a dead planet.
Yes, indeed. We know that a whole of government and society approach is necessary to make the changes needed over the next 10 years, to accelerate the changes needed over the next 10 years, if we are to achieve the CBD vision, to live in harmony with nature by 2050. The private sector is a key agent of change in this transformation. Existing biodiversity-related initiatives such as Business for Nature, the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, the Capitals Coalition, and the WBCSD are supported by many private sector organizations in anticipation of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Today, we will have the pleasure to hear directly from business leaders from across the world on their reflections on the first draft of the framework, what could be improved to ensure that businesses are engaged in this process, and what they need to accelerate action on nature.
Now, we know that businesses are already committing and acting on nature. The message here is it's not enough. And so these companies need ambitious policies to be able to scale and speed up action. The Post-2020 Framework is the opportunity to demonstrate this ambition, just like the Paris Agreement did for climate. Companies are now calling for policy ambition on nature. In fact, more than 900 companies with combined annual revenue of $4.3 trillion, next slide please, are calling on governments to adopt policies now to reverse nature loss by 2030. And adopting such a global goal, halt and reverse nature loss by 2030, could really help simplify the agenda and encourage a whole community beyond just the CBD for all of us to act collectively towards the same objective. Draft one of the framework is a clear improvement from the previous draft, and we're really pleased to see that it's a step in the right direction towards adopting an impactful global biodiversity agreement. At Business for Nature, we really welcome the many improvements, in particular, the recognition of the role of business in co-leading the transformation towards an equitable, nature-positive, carbon-neutral world. However, well, there had to be some howevers. However, many key elements still need to be strengthened, improved, and refined to ensure that there's not only a successful adoption, but also the implementation of a transformative framework. And so we've set out 8 suggestions with specific text amendments for negotiators, for all of you on the line to consider including in the framework. And in just a few minutes, we'll hear more about these suggestions directly from businesses on the line with us.
But before we hand over to our business colleagues, we are delighted that Mr. Lui Ning, Director of the Office of the Executive Committee for COP15 of China, and Mr. Basile van Havre, co-chair of the CBD Post-2020 process, have messages for us. So let's listen to these first.
Dear friends, thanks to Eva of Business for Nature and a colleague from UNEP-WCMC for inviting me to give these opening remarks on behalf of the Office of the Executive Committee for CBD COP15. I'm pleased to open this webinar as the Chinese government, as the host of the COP15, is committed to work with all parties and stakeholders to deliver a truly transformative global biodiversity framework in Kunming. To be successful, it must be a framework for all that will generate change across all actors of the society to create an ecological civilization and a nature-positive economy. For this, the private sector has a key role to play. The Chinese government has always attached great importance to sustainable production and consumption practices to promote green and high-quality economic development. In recent years, the government has greatly promoted the protection of biodiversity by delineating ecological guidelines and leading large-scale reforestation programs, making great contributions to global carbon neutrality. China is also mobilizing the business sector to make them an actor of positive change and incentivize them to shift to green business models, managing nature resources in a sustainable way. A business and biodiversity forum will be held in parallel to COP15 to mobilize efforts from financial and business sectors in order to gather the highest momentum. A kick-off event themed the business and financial journey to Kunming. We are part of the solution has been held in June this year, which attract over 500 participants from business and financial sectors, governments, international organizations, and civil societies attended. On this basis, the China Business and Biodiversity Partnership is planned to be officially established during the COP15 Business and Biodiversity Forum, which will significantly step up business engagement to a new level. If we are ambitious together, the adoption of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework in Kunming can be a landmark to promote the strengthening of biodiversity governance by governments, civil society, and the private sectors around the world. We thank Business for Nature, UNEP-WCMC, WBCSD, and the Capital Coalition for organizing this webinar to enhance exchange between business and policymakers. I hope we can work together to explore more effective solutions, building a shared future for all life on Earth. I thank you very much.
Wonderful. And we greatly appreciate this clear message from China, the commitment to achieve a transformative agreement, the invitation for all stakeholders to be engaged in this process and also to engage during the various events around the COP towards achieving a nature positive world. Let's now hear from Basile on his messages on why the private sector should play a role in biodiversity.
Good day. My name is Basil Van Haaf, and I'm the co-chair with Francis Ogwal from Uganda of the Open-Ended Working Group. I was asked today to talk to you about the role of business and the importance of their view in the formulation of the framework and in its implementation. Let's start with the diagnostic we've done of the work done so far. One conclusion we collectively reached is that we wanted this framework to be a framework for all. And what does that mean? That means that we want all parts of society directly engaged into the formulation of the framework and in its implementation. This should not be just the framework of the CBD focal point. It has to be the framework for all, and in part, the framework for the business community. Now, let's look at the proposal for draft one and the target and see how those targets are important for the business, but perhaps we should turn our attention to the third block about tools and solutions, where business has a very direct relation with some of the targets. And let's first look at the first block on mainstreaming, and particularly at target 15, that is directly related to the role of business, both in terms of impact they may have on biodiversity, but also in terms of their dependencies on biological processes. We're suggesting that they should be aware of those dependencies and aware of those impacts and reduce those impacts by 50%. There is also a need to consider the full cycle, and we're reflecting here about circular economy, how our products are managed, how extractive industries are managed, and how disposition of products are managed. This is in turn linked with consumer choice. And beyond information about the choice and the impact of those choices, consumer needs to be provided by sound alternative, and business has a role play in that. Let me finish by talking about financial flow that is mentioned in two places. I'm talking here about private sector financial flow, the decision for investments, how lenders are providing money to business ventures, and how they're qualifying the risk associated with that, and will be enabling or not those activities to take place. Target 14 include the notion that all financial flow should be reflecting biodiversity values. And then target 19 is talking about the amount of those financial flow. We're talking about increasing the financial flow up to 200 billion. Including in that is private sector finance, and ensuring there is adequate supply of finance and we can maximize that. So all in all, you will see business in many places in our framework. The recommendation we have for you is to make the best efforts you can to engage business in your country to formulate your national position. Listen to their advice and include them as much as you can. This will make for a better framework for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Basil, for this excellent introduction, which actually is the perfect segue before our now more detailed discussion on the framework and what it actually means for business. So now it's really my great pleasure to introduce our four business speakers who will take us through the detailed Business for Nature suggestions on how we could strengthen concretely the ambition of the framework. So on the line with us today, we have Renata Polini, who's the head of nature at Holcim, Marcelo Bejar, Vice President, Sustainability and Group Affairs at Natura & Co., Madeleine Ronquest, Head of Environmental and Social Risk Management at First Rand Group, and also Jayant Kairan, Director of Global Public Policy at Walmart. So we have a great, a great panel for you to take you through these suggestions. And so starting with you, Renata, very welcome. Thanks so much for being with us. You're with the Holcim Group. So for those who don't know, Holcim is a Swiss multinational building materials company that operates in over 70 countries. So from your perspective, Renata, could you please tell us why your company is interested and why the CBD framework is essential for Holcim and how it could better set the direction of travel for all actors? Over to you, Renata.
Thank you, Eva, and the team for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. So, science is clear. We have 10 years to reverse the loss of biodiversity. This means that by 2030, we should collectively have transformed our practice. This is not only a moral obligation, but also an economic imperative, as each and every business relies on nature to prosper. Businesses need and expect governments to provide directions at the highest political level to set the directions for positive business actions on nature. More specifically, we need a clear global goal to encourage the uptake of nature-positive business models and to orient investments and business decision-making process around nature-positive outcomes. The mission of the framework is the opportunity to set this global goal for all actors to act. To generate momentum, we need a clear, simple, and really mission. It would help engaging many actors beyond the CBD, not familiar with biodiversity issues, like the 1.5-degree objective generated action on climate. The current proposed mission is long, complicated, confusing, and does not reflect the ambition level needed to achieve the 2050 vision. This is why Business for Nature is calling for CBD negotiators to adopt the following mission. The 2030 mission for this framework is to take urgent actions across society to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030 to achieve a nature-positive world for the benefit of the planet and people. And as Eva mentioned, more than 900 companies, including Holcim, have signed the Nature is Everyone's Business call to actions, calling on governments to adopt policies now to reverse natural loss in this decade. Such a clear and strong mission would help simplify the nature agenda, guide investments, and ultimately provide the direction for all of us, including through our supply chains. It's also aligned with the growing momentum around creating a nature-positive world by 2030, supported by the Race Is On campaign, the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, and the G7. Now, let me give you a concrete example of how the adoption of such mission could help Holcim to accelerate action. Holcim is committed to delivering a nature-positive future. We will reach this ambition by measuring our biodiversity impact and implementing effective actions to increase biodiversity, restoring 100% of our quarries. Restore nature is part of our DNA, as our operations are strongly linked to natural resources, and our business plays a key role in tackling biodiversity loss and degradation. In addition to that, we all know that the challenge of climate change and biodiversity loss are intrinsically linked. Put simple, climate change is occurring due to the society emitting more greenhouse gases that the nature can absorb and process. Nature-based solutions could address 1/3 of reduction needed to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. Holcim is implementing nature-based solutions, for example, by bringing more nature into the cities. With this, we are minimizing the heat island effect, we are enhancing biodiversity, restoring the nature water cycle, and even improving air quality. However, and there is always a however, we know that alone, our impact in the world is limited. We need commitments like this at a government level to be taken, so others can join us amplifying our positive impact on nature. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Renata. Really, I think you shared with everyone on the line with us the urgency of the situation and explicitly explained how businesses work with clear guidelines and goals, and that's why it is so key to get that mission right. And I should just say, I loved also the way you succinctly said, restoring nature is part of Holcim's DNA. we're hearing more and more companies recognize not only their impacts, but dependencies on nature from all sectors of business. So thank you again. And as we've heard, it's essential to have a clear and simple goal to generate real momentum on nature, but we also need those detailed and concrete targets on how to achieve this mission to halt and reverse nature loss. And so it's now my pleasure to introduce Marcelo, who's the Vice President of Sustainability and Group Affairs at Natura & Co. Natura & Co. is the 4th largest beauty company in the world and includes Natura, Body Shop, Aesop, and Avon. It's headquartered in Brazil. And so over to you, Marcelo. What's your reflection on the framework and how could it encourage more business action on the ground? Over to you. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Eva, and thank you so much for the organizers. Very kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you. For us, this framework is super, super important. So I'd like to start by saying that current economic and business practices are putting nature under ever-increasing pressure. The framework should engage business so that from being part of the problem, they transition to being part of the solution. Targets have been improved, but they still do not address sufficiently the indirect drivers of biodiversity loss, or they don't have the correct level of ambition. As a result, business might not engage as they should, as they are doing in other conventions. For example, on Target 10, we welcome the new focus of this target on land use as main drivers of biodiversity loss. The transformation of the food, land, and ocean systems across the value chain is essential to reduce the environmental footprints. However, the causality link between sustainable management and increased productivity must be removed. While increased productivity is a desirable outcome, it should not be the automatically proposed measure, as increased productivity through unsustainable practices are harmful to biodiversity. On suggestion number 3, value and embedded nature, integrating nature into all decision-making. Governments, company, and financial organizations will take better decisions if they use the information beyond short-term profit and GDP that includes impacts and dependencies on nature. We welcome that draft 1 already reflects the need to embed the value of nature in all decision-making, especially with targets 14, 15, 16, that together focus on integrating biodiversity in decision-making by governments, target 14, private sector, target 15, as well as consumers on target 16. However, these targets need further strengthening to ensure governments require businesses and financial institutions to measure, disclose, and report on their dependencies and impacts on biodiversity. We strongly welcome Target 15 as a first step in making business across of positive change. I'd like to highlight 3 elements that could be clarified to have a stronger target. First, a key element of transformation is the integration on biodiversity value in decision-making. This must be included in Target 15 to complement and echo Target 14. Second, we suggest changing report for disclose, as report can be understood as internal reporting. There is a strong movement of normalizing disclosure, and this target should reflect this. Third, reducing negative impacts by half will not be enough to achieve the vision of the framework. We will only see the transformation needed if business align all their practices to a nature-positive economy. This should be reflected in the target to set the direction of travel to all business. Suggestion 4. Business are actively engaging on the SDGs and the Paris Agreement targets because they have business relevant indicators. This helps business to track their contributions toward the goals and targets. This is not yet the case with the framework. Parties must adopt a strategic approach in mobilizing business input at a national level and translate national targets into explicit sectoral plans to set expectations regarding business contribution. Now, let me give you a concrete example of how this could help Natura & Co to accelerate action. We are a group made up of 4 purpose-driven businesses: Avon, Natura, The Body Shop, and Aesop. All 4 businesses depend heavily on nature and have a strong appetite to drive positive environmental impact. These days, especially with COP26 on the horizon, businesses are becoming increasingly aware of their carbon emissions, how they contribute to climate change, and ultimately, how they affect our collective ability to reach the Paris Agreement. What business remain less clear on is the connection between climate and nature. Unless nature is properly valued, the goals of the Paris Agreement cannot be reached. Our main ecosystems are reaching dangerous tipping points. They must be protected and restored if we are really aiming to reach net zero. To stop global warming, we need clear science-based targets on nature, analogous to those we are developing on carbon. Natura & Co builds its business around the Amazon rainforest, which is on the verge of its tipping point. Without an agreement on nature, of the kind we have suggested to you here today, our business will struggle to regenerate nature as they could. The future can be brighter and better. This is why we fully support the suggestions I have put forward on behalf of Business for Nature today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marcelo. Really great to hear your overview and your support for those specific targets that relate to business, and that, you know, we all strongly welcome target 15 with also some concrete suggestions there. Nice to hear at the end Natura's integrated approach, climate and nature and people together, and we look forward to then engaging more on that. Thanks, Marcelo. So we're also today really delighted to have Monique Akulo with us, who is Senior Internal Monitoring and Evaluation Officer from the Government of Uganda. Monique, great to see you on the line also. Thanks so much for being with us. Could you please share some of your reflections on the role of business in the targets in the framework? Thank you. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for this second opportunity to share with you what I feel and also understand from our submissions that we've made in relation to the Post-Global Framework. When it comes to the business community, we are seeing now the problem has been shared with us from the previous speakers, and we see their interdependency. So we will give some real roles for the businesses because we see climate, the ecosystem and the climate generally has caused a lot of degradation, and we see ecosystems declining by 47% in size and condition. And this high dependency needs to be controlled by having some roles in halting the biodiversity loss, and financing also is critical from the business sector. But we also see that mainstreaming and developing smart targets is one way to kickstart implementation so that we can drive this issue to the heart of government and policymakers. So there's need to promote partnership between governments and businesses. And then we also need tools and financing solutions and enabling conditions so that businesses can implement some of the following key issues. And through this, we can integrate economic theories, models into biodiversity planning and management to achieve transformative change with the local communities, especially IPLCs that depend on this. But also we need to increase awareness about why businesses should prioritize biodiversity investment. And then we also need to increase enforcement and regulation, because businesses depend a lot on natural capital, and hence we need to protect the investment climate to reduce compliance negligence. But we also need to identify effective financing solutions that support the private sector to engage in biodiversity conservation. However, the current COVID-19 exposes businesses to having challenges with regulations and also access to the natural capital that we are talking about. So we need to call for incentives and subsidies to support economic recovery. But also we need to be careful when considering these, because we need to avoid promoting negative and harmful incentives and subsidies. Then we develop effective risk management strategies, which will support core elements such as the governance of these natural assets we have and services, and also identify the nature-based risks, indicators, and targets for monitoring and assessing progress. And then finally, among the effective ways we can accelerate implementation is to focus on having inclusive and integrated approaches for biodiversity critical decision-making, where governments, together with businesses, can collaborate, work together, reinforce trust through transparency, accountability, and partnership in the long run, so that we can conserve our nature. Thank you. With those few remarks, back to you, Eva.
Thank you so much, Monique, and really a very rich contribution with so many aspects. And the key point in terms of that complementarity, or that partnership, the collaboration between business and government to really make this work and to avoid perverse outcomes, I think is an important takeaway for all of us. We are looking forward to some of these things. I'm sure will come up in the deliberations of the open-ended working group in a few weeks' time, when you talk about the tools and approaches to ensure that the contributions of all of society can be made towards the Global Biodiversity Framework. We have heard a number of howevers today, and I'm going to say another however. We know that we won't be able to achieve this objective and to the objective and the 2050 vision if we don't close the finance gap for nature. So let's explore how we could implement and finance the Global Biodiversity Framework. We are delighted to have with us today Madeleine Ronquist. Madeleine is the head of environmental and social risk management at FirstRand, one of the largest financial institutions in South Africa. Over to you, Madeleine. Could you please share with us your reflection on the framework and the approach to resource mobilization?
Thank you very much, Corley. Yes, thank you. I am today a representative of Business for Nature, and I'm proud to be representing them. I agree that the finance gap should be closed to make the framework work, and that capital flows need to be directed towards biodiversity management. This is what we've seen from experience that works well, and it will work the same for biodiversity. If we look at the amount of investment that is required to reverse the global biodiversity crises, we can see that it's around $700 billion per year. This is a considerable amount of money, and we need to do a lot to stimulate that capital flow. And if you then look at a review of recent done by Professor Dasgupta, he talks about estimated subsidies. Now I'll get back to subsidies now, which are between $5 and $7 trillion per year. And these subsidies are given to the sectors of fossil fuels, agriculture, fisheries, water and sanitation. And historically and currently, what these subsidies do is they create economic support for potentially environmentally harmful activities. So they distort prices, and resource allocation and investment decisions are skewed, altering the patterns of production and consumption in the economy, and increasing externalities and costs for society, and an inability to reverse nature loss and clean up pollution. Now, we like the fact that in Target 18, there is talk about reducing harmful subsidies, but we don't think that reduction of these subsidies will be enough. And we appreciate that it happens over time. But we think that in Target 18, a commitment must be made to eliminate all harmful direct and indirect subsidies, incentives, and tax policies, and to redirect them so that they can actually reward positive nature outcomes. And only if that is done, then we can create a level playing field for business. then there's nothing skewing the scale towards tipping it into the negative, but it actually creates incentive for positive nature investment. And so in the target, you will see that it talks about £500 billion, which seems like a very conservative number to reduce existing subsidies by. Actually, the target says redirect, repurpose, reform, but we would like to suggest the word eliminate is used, or reform subsidies and incentives that is harmful for biodiversity in a just and equitable way, including redirecting and repurposing. So we're reflecting on the redirection and repurposing again. All of the most harmful subsidies by at least 500 billion per year, and ensure that all direct investments and incentives, including public and private economic and regulatory incentives, are either positive or neutral for biodiversity. Then the next part of creating a finance gap or creating a bridge for financing the gap is, as we've dealt with now, the subsidies, and then we're looking at leveraging finance. So mainstreaming finance to go beyond short-term profit and GDP. And increasing green finance is essential, but just by saying so, it doesn't make it a big difference. So it won't trigger the transformation at the scale that is needed. The resource mobilization strategy should therefore not only focus on increasing resources, but also on greening mainstream finance to ensure that all financial flows from private and public actors are aligned with a nature positive economy. So then if we look at target 19 specifically, I think the finance sector and financial businesses have an essential role to play. And it should be reflected better in target 19, as only referencing leveraging private finance will not generate the engagement needed, as I said. This can be achieved by promoting regulatory measures, requiring financial institutions and businesses to align financial flows to a nature positive world. Financial institutions should be required to consider biodiversity impacts, including through internal exclusion policies, thematic and active engagement. Now, here I do think that the regulatory incentives are really important, because what we've also seen in the climate risk management space is that you have the movers, who are the businesses that move ahead of the pack, and they act without having regulation prompt them to do the right thing. But you do have smaller companies, which for many reasons may not be the first movers, and they need a little bit of a push or an incentive. So we suggest that the amendment is that increase financial resources from all sources to at least $200 billion per year, including new additional effective financial resources, increasing by at least $10 billion per year international financial flows to developing countries. And then we would like to add requiring financial institutions and businesses to integrate biodiversity values into all of their financial decisions. The rest of the target is we're happy with, but we think that requiring financial institutions to amend their cash flows and to have a very significant integrated approach to biodiversity values in their decision making is really critical. So as a group, we look at biodiversity before we lend and before we finance, and even in our investment portfolios. And the reason is that South Africa has very strong biodiversity legislation, so we already have some guidance in this space, but also because we understand the urgency. If you look at the IPCC first part of the report that was released over the weekend, there's a very dire outlook as to the targets that have been set in the Paris Agreement and us actually not going to make it unless we take very, very urgent action. And I mean, this has been coming for a few years now. And that makes this biodiversity framework so significantly important. We have this COP to discuss these issues at, and we must move at a fast pace, because in climate change, there are still some things that we can change, but the biodiversity losses that we will suffer in the next 10 years will be irreversible. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Madeleine, and thank you for those observations. And again, the complementarity of financial regulations and financial institution action, the integration of biodiversity considerations coming across very strongly. And it's hard to disagree. We can only agree that we all need to work towards the same agenda. There is really no more room for us to, the one part of society working against a nature agenda, against nature positive, and the others trying to achieve that. So this is really the political moment also for that policy commitment to the agenda and to transform the way of thinking about nature and how we ensure sustainability around that, sustainability of our investments also in the long term. I would like to turn to Frida Diaz, head of the Department for the Environment with the Government of Mexico, to share some of the reflections on this part of the agenda. Frida, please.
Thank you, Curly. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today. In this topic, Mexico recognizes that in order to eliminate or repurposing the subsidies and the incentives that are harmful to biodiversity, a full analysis of these mechanisms should be done. Furthermore, we also need national financial plans for biodiversity. It's important to note that these financial plans the resources need to be committed, will determine based on the needs of the frameworks, goals, and targets. As well, it is important to highlight that the impacts on dependencies on biodiversity of the productive sectors associated with their financial product and production models needs to be identified and internalized by them. These to enhance sufficient financing from all sources for the implementation of the Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework. Mexico also acknowledges that resources are limited. Therefore, the effective and efficient use of these financial resources is essential. Finally, noting that the full implementation of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will be significantly achieved by reducing drivers of biodiversity loss through reinforcing means of implementation. Particularly, increasing financial resources from all sources should entail also enabling conditions such as adequate regulations building and developing capacities, technology, and knowledge transfer and mainstreaming to achieve this, to close the financial gap. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frida. And indeed, means of implementation and the whole organization and support to implementation is such an important part of making this agenda work and making it effective. I'm pleased to invite Jayan Kairam to share some of the perspectives around implementation and how we go about and business role in that. Jayan is the Director of Global Public Policy at Walmart. And Walmart, as many of you may know, is an American multinational retail corporation and is the world's largest company by revenue and also the largest private employer in the world. Jayan, could you please tell us from your experience, also in the climate agenda, why do we need to focus on implementation?
Thank you, Corley, and thank you, Eva and the Business for Nature team. It is great to be with you all this morning. Let me reaffirm what other speakers have said on and just how important this framework is. And I'll focus on two suggestions that will ensure the framework resonates over time and across various environmental challenges. First, the success of the framework and its goals depends on its effective implementation. If we learn anything from the IKE targets, a robust and monitoring reporting mechanism is critical. BFN is concerned that the elements related to the implementation mechanism have been removed from the draft. They should remain a central element. From the business perspective, businesses generally prefer to operate in policy environments of certainty and consistency. Reliable reporting frameworks for member states allow business to know the direction in areas in need of acceleration. It shows business successful proof points in global supply chains and helps us recognize science-based approaches for national policy and interventions. Transparency and clarity on progress give business a clear signal on where to align and accelerate best practices in partnerships in restoration and regeneration work. Next slide. As BFN has outlined in its proposed amendment, the framework should design an iterative, consistent, and accountable process for parties to assess how much progress they have made collectively and at the member state level. This will ensure member states can ramp up the delivery of their biodiversity plans and commitments and to strengthen their national targets. Next slide. Secondly, the framework should resonate with a large community of actors, well beyond the CBD community, and recognize and align with other global efforts addressing the climate and health crises we face. Everyone is well aware of the cost of climate change on biodiversity, reaffirmed dramatically by the IPCC with the report from yesterday. Without action, in 3 to 5 to 10 years from now, resources could become too expensive to produce and sell, and more than that, ecosystem services we all rely on, like water purification, crop pollination, disease control, could be at risk. Healthy societies, resilient economies, thriving businesses rely on nature to provide food, products, and services. Studies point to how nature can provide 1/3 of the solution to climate change. Yet for the past 40 years, this value of nature has been largely overlooked and is equally beneficial to food systems, community resilience, and sustainable supply chains. Next slide. BFN welcomes Target 8, which recognizes this alignment and sets a target. But BFN believes that it can be strengthened by including the concept of nature-based solutions with an ecosystem-based approach that represent the best solution to tackle climate and nature in an integrated way. This is essential to make the CBD process relevant beyond the convention and bring convergence with the UNEP-WCMC process. Let me give you a concrete example of why an alignment between nature and climate policy dialogue is important to Walmart in our goals to becoming a regenerative company. Walmart recently raised our ambition by targeting zero emissions across our company by 2040. We committed to becoming a regenerative company, and with the Walmart Foundation, are working to protect, manage, or restore at least 50 million acres of land and 1 million square miles of ocean by 2030. Our customers want to feel good about shopping with us and good about the products they buy. Throughout product supply chains, we encourage adoption of regenerative practices in agriculture, fisheries, and forest management. Walmart US recently implemented the largest pollinator health effort from a US grocer. We have committed to 100% deforestation-free beef and soy from critical Latin American landscapes. I want to focus, though, on our Project Gigaton initiative. This is an example of how we're working across our supply chain to drive sustainable production, promote regenerative agricultural practices, and make the direct value proposition of climate reduction and customer benefit together. This makes sense for us as well because most of our environmental impact comes from our supply chain. To date in Gigaton, more than 31 suppliers have signed on, and those suppliers have reported a total of 400 million metric tons of emissions avoided through practices related to energy, agricultural waste, packaging, forests, and product use and design. The goal is to get a gigaton avoided emissions by 2030. Through Gigaton, we offer resources like calculators to help set and report on goals, workshops on best practices, and links on additional resource initiatives. In our forest pillar, we support deforestation efforts through innovative sourcing and the use of technology to increase transparency on supply chains. One member, Unilever, intends to certify 60,000 hectares in the region to the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil Standards. Nestle is aiming to plant 3 million trees in Malaysian forests in a move to enhance biodiversity. We estimate our agriculture pillar in gigaton could contribute as much as 15% towards the gigaton goal, while providing benefits such as improved land use, higher yields and reduced food waste, enhanced soil health, and reduced nutrient runoff. We regularly ask suppliers to adopt best practices in areas such as manure management, enteric emissions, feed inputs, and other activities in animal agriculture. We recognize our approach is not perfect, but we cannot wait for action. We know the science of partnerships will continue to evolve, as well as measurement tools and new approaches. We created a framework that inspires action right now and makes the direct links between climate and regeneration. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jayant, really sharing with us the importance of the success of a framework that relies on the effective implementation mechanism, but then also, just as you were expressing how businesses need that political certainty and this integrated climate nature approach where Walmart is, really leading the way very much in taking that integrated approach, understanding its full environmental footprint through its supply chain. So thank you so much for sharing those suggestions and your own experience with us. And so in fact, linked to this, I should just mention that on the 29th of July, just a week or so ago, Business for Nature and We Mean Business launched a joint publication called Building Integrated Policies for the Planet, which really tries to provide that high-level framework that brings together what leading businesses are calling on governments to do, both on climate and nature. We need to help converge and simplify some of those messaging. So I think, Mael has just popped that in the chat. So please feel free to look at that as well, as we need to address the twin crises of climate change and nature loss. So we're in wrap-up mode, and it was really great to see the comments coming through, and Mark raised, of course, also having a positive social impact. It's people and planet, it's nature, climate, and people together. As we know, we need to address all together or we'll fail on all. And also one of the comments that came up by Mark in the comments, and there were a few exchanges, was on the importance of businesses of all sizes taking action. And in the original text in draft 1, it specifically included that large, small and medium companies need to not only integrate, but also then report or, as we suggest, disclose their biodiversity values. And just as Jayant was saying, the biggest impact is going to be in the supply chain, and that supply chain is going to be some of those smaller companies. But we do need to manage the process so that it is manageable for all companies, essentially all companies in the system, all business, all of us, whole of society approach need to be working collaboratively towards these goals. It won't work if there are holes in the system. But thank you for raising that. I think it's a very healthy exchange that we're having. We've also heard about the importance of oceans and much more. So just to wrap up from my side, I mean, I think this exchange has just demonstrated the level of ambition that is needed, the urgency of the situation that we're living in right now. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We've got to make sure we've got a strong framework that everyone can then focus on, have that common mission and strategic and smart targets moving forward. I think we've also heard a lot about how collaboration is so critical across societies, also within departments, whether it's within a company's department or within a government's ministries working together. And we've also heard how critical the economic case is for business and finance to now really understand the material impacts and dependencies on nature and biodiversity, and how that policy ambition can scale and speed up even more business action that is so critically needed. So with that, I just want to end on my side by saying we are here to help. We're trying to work with you to provide concrete solutions ahead of the open-ended working group 3. We wish you all the very best of success. If you're interested in having a bilateral session with us, we're very happy to set that up. And now I'll hand back to Corley to take it home, but thanks all of you from my side.
Wonderful, thank you so much, Eva. And Yes, great discussion. Thank you very much for the active engagement in the chat, as Eva has highlighted. Thank you to everyone there. Big thank you to other speakers to share the different perspectives and the responses to the respectives. So thank you to everyone. And I can also just reiterate this is possible due to the hard work of the technical team behind the scenes. So a big thank you to our team members as well to help us to organize this and get everything in one place. So we are finishing with a few minutes left to the hour, and we would like to invite you to stay and listen to some of the messages recorded earlier by CEOs in terms of their perspectives on the nature agenda, on reversing biodiversity loss, and why a healthy planet is also important to their businesses. Thank you very much, and a great rest of the day to everyone.
The science is clear. Nature's everyone's business, and the next 10 years are critical.
We must reverse nature loss before we reach a tipping point from which ecosystems will not recover.
We are proud of applying our science to drive innovation that helps reverse nature loss.
How we can work together as a human community to respond fast, better.
By recovering waste as a source of energy and a source for raw materials, we are preserving Earth's resources and shaping cleaner cities.
Cost of inaction is too high when it comes to nature loss.
We believe that we nourish people by nature with very healthy dairy products, but we can only do that if we nourish the planet.
We measure the impact on biodiversity at portfolio level and strive for a net positive gain in 2030.
We need governments and policymakers to also be transformative and create new laws and frameworks, and of course in collaboration then with businesses that needs to step up with their actions and their commitments.
Only by working together with governments, communities and societies will we be able to create a healthy planet for everyone.
We need to develop and implement frameworks that integrate the value of nature in decision-making and global market mechanisms.
Policies that make the best available technologies mainstream, transparently measure their impacts, and integrate sustainability into the education system.
I welcome rules regulation which encourage circular economy and climate and incentivize companies to have a positive impact on biodiversity.
We owe it to our stakeholders and to the next generation of stakeholders to protect nature.
Our collective future depends on global communities coming together to ensure a greener and more inclusive tomorrow.